most people look at the wine label to find out where it's from, what appellation, and is it a California wine? And,
right.
And then, of course, the type. Is it a Syrah? Is it a Zinfandel?
I always like to see if they're cute or clever, the label.
Well, let me tell you what, Patty, as far as wine marketing goes, they're targeting you right now. Some of the top wines right now are targeted specifically to women that want that. The
creative, cute, clever, appealing labels.
Yeah.
Very nice.
What you don't often see on labels are the ingredients for the wine. Most people know that wine grapes, of course, are in there, and some yeast, but there are other aspects to refining a wine, and if you list one ingredient, you got to list them all, apparently. Paul Draper is the CEO and winemaker at Ridge Winery. That's in Cupertino in the Bay Area, and they have begun listing ingredients on the wine labels. Paul joins us right now, and a very good day to you, sir.
Randall, how are you?
Fantastic. Thank you. I saw a little clip, I think it was on winebusiness.com a week or so ago. And then they had a link to your website, and I watched a video that Ridge put together explaining the ingredient issue. And I thought, we got to have you on to talk about this because
that's kind of you.
Yeah. So are you one of the first to start listing the ingredients?
Well, only if you go back about 30 years when we tried to do this and the federal authorities that approve your labels said, no, you can't do it because we don't require it of anyone else, and that just isn't the way it's going to be.
You can't mess it up for everyone else.
Exactly. And so, so we backed off. And then about 3, 4, 5 years ago, my friend Randall Graham at Bonnie Doon started putting ingredients on the label. And they didn't object, and we said, "Oh my God, we can do it."
Times have changed a little.
Last year we began.
So Ridge is in the foothills there above Cupertino. Technically, your address is Cupertino?
Yes, the nearest post office. We're up at 2,700 feet above it, and look at the ocean on one side and the bay on the other. It's an old winery built in the 1880s called Montebello.
And technically, that would be the Santa Cruz Mountains?
That's the Santa Cruz Mountains.
Yeah, okay. And that's where your friend's winery is as well. So it's the Santa Cruz Mountains that are on this ingredient kick.
Yes. And it's more that, one of the things that's come along, which is really interesting because I think it has so many positive aspects, is the idea of natural wine. The trouble is with that you're leaving out what the vineyard provides, that is the character that a specific good vineyard can actually give to a wine. And we get more and more into this thing that the winemaker, which is entirely a New World, American, Australian word, that is that we make the wine rather than it's something that actually comes from nature. And that means you get the grapes and then you decide what you want to make from it. You don't allow the place it was grown, the character of the grapes that come off that place, that sense of place, to determine what you make. And so we sort of decided, hey, we want to separate ourselves from that idea and say, yes, we really do want to show sense of place. And we also want to show that to make fine wine, you really don't need all of the additives and processes that are available to a winemaker today. And so we said, let's just list what we do, which is what's been done, for the last 100 years, 200 years, very traditional, very non-invasive additives and effects in making wine.
Interesting. So you're bringing attention to, everyone can grow Pinot Noir or Chardonnay or what have you, but you have this unique condition of soil and what's in the environment around you that makes your wine distinct from someone else's.
Well, yes, that's true, except that a lot of people are in the same position we are, if they'll give their vineyard a chance. That is, there are many, many sites that can produce really distinctive character. And if you don't demand of the ground that it give you huge yields, that is, if you take moderate yields, you can actually see the character that is there. Now, it's true that some areas, some vineyards, just either because you've got the wrong varietal planted or the character of the climate and soil is not going to give you that any distinctive character. It'll be perfectly good, but not very distinctive. But really, a lot of people can do this, and that's the main reason that we're doing it, is to try to encourage more people to go that way, to allow the place, the sense of place where it was grown, to show what's in the wine, rather than their winemaking skill.
I see. We're speaking with Paul Draper, CEO winemaker at Ridge Winery in the hills above Cupertino, about listing ingredients on wine labels. Paul, you mentioned some very traditional additives that have been used for the better part of a couple of 100 years or more. What would those include? And then what would the other additives that we might find in some wines made by other winemakers that are just simply not listed on the label?
Well, the traditional ones would be, besides, of course, and this isn't something we set as something that should be done, but we actually allow the natural yeast that come in on the grapes and the natural, what's called the malolactic bacteria that create a secondary fermentation called malolactic. We don't inoculate for those things, which, 98% of the world does, because for thousands of years, those two things have always come in on the grapes, and if you allow them to, they'll do the fermentation and they'll turn grapes into wine without your adding anything. So you don't have to start with that. To add an inoculum, a commercial yeast, commercial malolactic, that's perfectly fine. We don't do it. We don't have to do it. But then the other things would be things like if a grape like Syrah, which really lacks acidity, or Zinfandel, depending on where it's grown, cannot have as much as acidity as ideal, you could add a limited amount of tartaric acid, which is the natural acid in wine. And that's been done for a long, long time, well more than 100 years.
To boost what wasn't there naturally.
Yeah, to get a better balance of acidity with the fruit of the wine, the rest of the makeup. You could lower the acidity in some cold areas, like we are here in Santa Cruz Mountains. We can get too much natural acidity, and in that case, a traditional way to do it is to add a very small amount of calcium carbonate to precipitate out a very small amount of the acid, again to get a better balance in the wine.
And that's like what you would find in Tums or something?
I'm not sure, but yes, I suppose it's something that allows some of that precipitates the acidity. So,
okay.
The other one would be water. If you get, for example, Zinfandel is typical. If it gets really hot during the harvest, Zinfandel will ripen much faster than many other varietals. It'll just go over the top so quickly with heat that you can't keep up, and you can't pick all the grapes before they go overripe. And so you've got some fermenters that are just have got more sugar and therefore are going to make a riper wine than you may want, in which case what's happened is that when that heat hit, the vine pulled water back from the grapes to protect itself. Oh. And they haven't raisined, but they've lost their plumpness, let's say. Okay, you add a very small amount of water to those particular fermenters to replace the water that was pulled back into the vine, and you have a better balanced wine.
And if you list one ingredient, you got to list them all. So right. On the label, it would say water, right?
Like we make a very fine Zinfandel from Benny Ducey's vineyard in Paso.
Mm-hmm.
And, for example, in the 2011, there were a couple of tanks where we actually had to add a very tiny amount, I think 0.5% or something of water to balance those wines, and it's on the label. So we have, those are the most non-invasive traditional. The French, for example, where in cool climates for years they've never gotten enough ripeness. They are today with a little global warming, but that is they would add sugar, a thing invented by a guy named Chaptal They call it chaptalization. And they'd add sugar to get better ripeness.
Oh, okay.
And if it's done with a really light touch, again, it improves the wine rather than.
I think we just lost him there. Well, that was Paul Draper, CEO, winemaker at Ridge Winery in the hills above Cupertino. It's right at the end of the segment, so Paul, your timing was okay. We could have talked to him for the whole hour.
I know. I have 2 more questions for him.
I know. Fascinating. We have to have him back on.
Yes.
So, Paul, we will have you back on. Paul Draper, CEO, winemaker, where they are listing the ingredients now. A great wine there at Ridge Vineyards. You're listening to Eat, Drink, Explore. We're back in a moment with our travel deals segment.